Greetings and welcome to an LGR thing where, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but we're commemorating 15 years of this channel here on YouTube. Well, really 15 years of just the LGR show on this channel. I've been doing stuff on YouTube since 2006, but yeah, LGR has been going for 15 years as of 2024. The end of June, beginning of July was really when I started this show back in 2009, just sort of for a bit of fun, really, a bit of a challenge to myself. You know, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do one video a week for a year and see how that goes, and just kind of never stopped. And you know, I don't know why. I mean, I do know why. I was having fun, but I certainly never set out to do this as a career. Certainly didn't anticipate doing this for 15 years or even 5 years. You know, I don't know. I'm just still kind of here. And so I wanted to say thank you very much for watching all this time, supporting in every way that y'all support the show, and just, yeah, generally being awesome. Like, seriously, there's ups and downs to YouTube always, but in general, this has been fantastic. Like 15 years that I never thought would occur like this. I don't know. I'm still flabbergasted this is even a thing that I do. You know, I've done all kinds of different celebrations, anniversary things here on the channel before, but I thought I'd do something a little bit different this time and just talk about the last 15 years in general as it pertains to this hobby and kind of this channel and just the community and like retro and vintage and computing, because my goodness, 15 years is an eternity when it comes to technology and electronics and just all the stuff that we do. The LGR show unintentionally began at the start of the modern wave of retro gaming and vintage computing enthusiasm, at least as I see it. It really got in on the ground level, at least in terms of online presence being popular or becoming popular, although it certainly wasn't when I first started. And that was one of the reasons I started, because there was no one really that I knew of doing what I wanted to do, you know, covering certain old computers and talking about MS-DOS and PCs and the shareware games that I remember. And I kind of felt really, really alone. And that's definitely not the case anymore. In fact, I now feel really grateful to have done all of this at the time that I've done it, you know, through really all the 2010s and a little bit before and now a little bit after. I used to really lament not growing up in the late 1970s or in the 80s, you know, at the dawn of computing and seeing all these early microcomputer things as they were happening. But the more I think about it, I truly feel that we are currently in a golden era for vintage computing, retro gaming, whether you're getting into the hobby for the first time or you've been doing it for decades. Obviously, there's some downsides as well to how things are currently, but there's a whole lot of upsides, and that's what I want to really focus on here. It's easy to take these things for granted. The state of things just feels normal until you kind of look back. So we got some hindsight, and let's take an opportunity here to look back at the past 15 years. And we got to begin with the community itself, because that is the biggest thing, and retro computing especially, but vintage gaming and just the whole ecosystem of this online community, and off as it expands more and more. But there are more people than ever interested in vintage computing and gaming, old and young alike. Like, at this point, I hear more from people a whole generation or two younger than me, just providing feedback on the videos and saying they really get a kick out of this stuff and getting into retro for the vibe or the aesthetic, or you know, just the lower fidelity, less connected aspect of it. You know, it's mostly offline, and a lot of people get a lot of enjoyment out of that if they've been online like their whole life. There's a legitimate interest there, and I really don't think that you can be too young to be passionate about vintage stuff. Like, heck, when I started LGR, I was only 22. Some people didn't like that, but I just thought it was fun. I couldn't help it. And I think that the progression of all this has mostly been, like, by and large, a positive thing. Like, we went from all these scattered users groups and chat rooms and forums all over the place online, and in my case, and a lot of people that I still know are on here, like piracy sites, Underground Gamer, Black Cats Games, Demonoid, just doing things on there and sharing YouTube videos and the stuff that was being shared. And yeah, now social media and the video sharing and streaming and Discord and chat things and on and on and on is constantly evolving and getting larger. In a way, I do miss the older smaller community sometimes, but I also love how widespread and diverse the retro computer scene has become, to the point where even the most obscure system or problem has hardcore enthusiasts and problem solvers coming up with solutions and add-ons and things. And also all the huge conventions like the Vintage Computer Festival Southwest I just went to, and of course Midwest, which has like 3,000 or 4,000 visitors a year now, and like it's just getting bigger and bigger, which leads to people of all kinds from literally worldwide all in on the same hobby, and it's great. That said, the obvious downside to all of this comes in the form of overall scarcity and expense of getting into the hobby especially, but even if you've been in it for a long time. Collecting and acquiring new things to mess around with, it just ain't the same as it used to be, and that's how it is. The cost of original hardware has skyrocketed, especially in like 2020 for obvious reasons, but even in the years since, it hasn't come down all that much. Software, particularly big box PC games, have gone up massively as well, which that hasn't been fun. As much as I used to love collecting those, I barely do anymore. And you know, some of that's due to the whole weird back alley hustle of grading and speculation online, but it goes beyond that. You know, even commonplace, I don't want to do, why am I doing all these quotes? You know what I mean? Common big box games, right? That used to be known as common, kind of aren't anymore. Like in decent condition and in good shape, and they got all the things with them, they can go for hundreds and hundreds of dollars now, if it's even a slightly well-known classic game. And thrifting, thrifting, don't even get me started. That whole scene has completely changed from what it was even 5 years ago, much less 15. I've been doing LGR thrifts for 10 years, and going back and looking at those early episodes now, it's basically unrecognizable. Just going to your everyday thrift store in this area and the stuff that I would find for the prices, it's wild. You know, thrifting is a whole entire subculture and genre of its own at this point. And I was doing it for years and years before ever filming it. And yeah, just looking back at that, it's nuts, man. I miss old thrifting. And who do we blame for that? Okay, I admit that a bit of this inflation of interest or value or whatever has got to be due to the proliferation of channels like mine and just greater coverage in general, right? Like, even though I'm not a reseller, I try not to focus on the value, the current resale value of things when I pick them up or talk about them, but it is sort of an inescapable reality, especially nowadays as more and more people are trying to just make an extra buck because life sucks. I also see the other side of it, whereas, you know, at the same time, it's also lending value to things or letting people become aware of things that they just didn't know existed. And I know for sure that leads to some more of these things being saved from the garbage. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from folks who said they would have completely overlooked certain computers or games or pieces of technology had it not been for my videos. And, you know, like as an example of that, back when I started, a 486 or Pentium 1 PC was seen as practically valueless. You could barely give them away. I was just picking them up left and right. And nowadays, you're lucky to find one at all. But back onto the positive side of things though, and you know, looking back at just the hobbyist tech and enthusiast kind of add-on things that you had to pick from in 2009, back then there were certainly plenty of hand-soldered, made-with-love hack jobs and little adapters and add-ons and things. Limited options really, but you know, they were out there for flash card interfaces and video adapters and stuff, but those days are long gone, thankfully. And what we have now is just absurd. You can get stuff that looks like professionally manufactured add-ons made by hobbyists and homebrew folks all day long. And there are very few needs that aren't fulfilled in some way by like an open source project or whatever. And this is fueled by all kinds of things like the rise of Internet Archive becoming like the place to dump stuff, like publicly available software and documentation for preservation, and like all of the different modern recreations of classic machines, whether they're official or less so. Faster and more accurate emulation software, especially on the PC side of things. And of course, you got boards like the Raspberry Pi and FPGA hardware and stuff like that, which amplifies the overall desire and development efforts for all this type of stuff. Not to mention the absolute onslaught of homebrew add-on cards and devices. You got your flash cards and sound cards and different hard disk interfaces and video converters, Wi-Fi modems and Ethernet things for machines that were just never supposed to have that kind of access. It's awesome. And you've even got people making, rare old hardware with original parts, or recreating it with FPGAs or microcontrollers or whatever else, and other folks coming up with completely new hardware, adding greater functionality and speed that we could only dream of on our machines back in the day, or even in 2009. And looking back at the past 15 years, it's wild how much of this was spurred on just by the combination of having better software to create this stuff, or better tooling, or better, cheaper tooling, even available for hobbyists to use that want to engineer these things, and community documentation out there, shared knowledge, and all these wikis and whatnot. Plus, you can use programs like KiCad or Altium. I don't, but the people that actually do this stuff. And there's also all those services, right? PCBWay and DigiKey and JLC PCB, and I'm sure a bunch of other sponsorships. But they're important to have around if you're into this scene. It's easier to order boards and cheaper than I think it's ever been. And also in there is 3D printers. They finally got affordable and then got really, really good. It's interesting, the same year I started LGR, that's when the first MakerBot 3D printer came out, I think. And I finally recently got into the 3D printing scene, and it's so easy now. It's just awesome. And also just cannot overlook Linux. Linux got really good. It's always been good for some things, don't get me wrong. I've used it ever since 1999 in some form or another, but nowadays the modern distros and whatnot, and the stuff that usually comes packed in with these things, especially the more specialized ones, it's so easy to find and update your packages and get all kinds of resources, whether or not they're legit. It'll just download them or whatever through scripts, and you can also play Windows software a lot of times even better than actual Windows machines or VMs or whatever, not to mention all the console games and arcades. There's things like RetroPie, of course, collecting all these shell scripts together and making it dead simple to set up and get going on a Pi or similar things, and compatibility layers like Wine, and of course the front ends that make that even easier, and of course Proton, holy crap. Systems like the Steam Deck that really brought that to the forefront. But there's 50,000 of these x86 handhelds now, plus infinite numbers more of all these Android handhelds. None of this stuff was even on the radar in 2009 that I know of. Sure, everybody was like, oh, one of these days it's going to be the year of Linux, but I don't know, maybe we're in a decade of Linux. And it extends to broader industry trends and just pop culture and media in general, movies, music, TV, etc., etc. Vaporwave, for instance. I don't even think that existed as a genre in 2009 when I started. Albums like Echo Jams and Floral Shop just became kind of instant classics, at least among a certain type of retro folk. There were some synthwave and chillwave, retrowave, future wave, synth outrun type of stuff that was out there. You had the movie Drive in 2011. That really kind of clued me in that was a thing. I think for me, that's when I first ran into that. And of course, Hotline Miami a year later, but again, spurred on by a lot of the stuff that's on YouTube and this general community that, expands into abandoned places and urbex and, exploring dead malls and that kind of stuff. It's not just the vaporwave, but, a lot of those folks are also into the old computing. And so it all kind of mingles, right? It mingles. Which also ties into the resurgence of vinyl records and cassette tapes more recently, and even overtaking sales of CDs for some of those, which I think CDs are going to come back too, but whatever, that's probably another 5 to 10 years. Or general pop culture things like Ready Player One and Wreck-It Ralph, or even Pixels, right? All these movies, plus a billion great documentaries that have come out over the past 15 years. Holy crap. We've gotten some really good stuff to watch. And there's the whole 80s pop culture trend, which I guess is still going with Stranger Things and all that. It's fascinating to see all this evolve to the point now we're getting to 90s, 2000s nostalgia. It's getting weird. In 2009 when I started, 8-bit, 16-bit style, retro aesthetic kind of games, even just indie games, they still felt like kind of a fresh thing. Flash, Macromedia Flash was still the dominant way to distribute this stuff. And websites like Newgrounds, where you went to play things like Meat Boy and Cannibal and whatnot. It's Flash games, right? And then they started becoming real games. And you got VVVVV in Minecraft, which was still an alpha at the time, but it was around, and heck, Roblox was even around back then, but it was completely different to what it is now. And then you just got the whole rise of that whole scene, like online distribution for indies became way easier, Steam Greenlight and all that stuff, but then it became arguably oversaturated to the point where it's very hard to keep up anymore. You know, you got like retro style FPSs or boomer shooters or whatever you want to call them. Seems like there's a new one coming out every week. Those certainly didn't exist when I started LGR, and those have just exploded in popularity. Plus all of the countless delightful new games being made for old systems all the time, like often with big boxes and feelies and physical documentation and even floppy disks and stuff. I never thought big boxes would return, but they certainly have if you look out for them. You know, you've got reproductions and re-releases galore through certain companies. Like they're just making that their entire business model. You know, crazy obscure stuff even that's been in licensing hell forever or locked away in a certain system. Now it's getting ported to the PC and PS5 and Switch all the time, and decompiling, reverse engineering, creating new engines for old games. It's a legit business now, and it's kind of wild to see. And yeah, again, even though it is a bit of a price barrier to get started collecting actual retro hardware and games and software anymore, if you just want to get into playing retro stuff, again, it's so much easier and more accessible and more options than ever. You know, not all just the emulation stuff, but like the official mini systems and retro-inspired hardware that lets you play old carts with new hardware in new ways, whether it's FPGA or otherwise. Or you got like retro compilations coming out, restored and modded systems, just all over the place. It's so easy to find like a guy that'll just clean up and make you the perfect Sega Genesis or whatever, or, you know, even people restoring PCs and selling custom towers now. Not to mention like optical drive emulators and flash carts and all those kind of add-ons, combined with really extremely capable scalers like all the RetroTinks and OSSCs and those type of things. HD and 4K is also a fantastic option. You don't need a CRT if you don't really want to, and you can still have like a basically lag-free, wonderfully scaled experience. Like, dude, when I started this show, capturing different PCs was a nightmare. Like, it could even be impossible to get certain resolutions and refresh rates and TTL and stuff like that. But now, like, I just need a good scaler and an adapter or two, and I can capture like every single system I have. It's a nice time to be into this, is what I'm saying over and over here. And of course, you know, all your tutorials and wikis and online forum posts and YouTube videos explaining all of this in excruciating detail, and channels out there dedicated to making sure that everybody knows how to get the best settings. These things were just not a thing when I started. It was a completely different landscape. I'm just happy to still be around to see it, right? Seeing all this evolve and seeing myself evolve too. Like, to get real for a second, I don't recognize myself anymore in those old videos of mine. I know people still enjoy them, but I find it very hard to go back and watch like the majority. And, you know, I think it's for the better, like overall. I was very much a more cynical, critical, easily irritated, unsure of myself kind of person in my 20s. I mean, even, you know, I guess early 30s, I don't know, whatever. I'm constantly getting older and rethinking my own reality and dealing with the ups and downs of doing this as a full-time job and burnout and stuff. But at the same time, I think that I'm constantly getting better and better and better, to the point where I always feel like I haven't done my best work yet. I still have so much more to say and to cover and do and explore, and like realms of this constantly expanding community of retro people and vintage nerd stuff that's just endlessly intriguing to me. And the passion is still there, if not more so than when I started. Like I said at the very beginning, this was a personal challenge, right? And just something to do while I had been kind of laid off and then rehired for less pay for more work at my job at the time. 2008, 2009 was sucky. But you know what? It was exciting to just continue doing this for fun and like seeing what the community reaction was. And, you know, things were just weird in YouTube land. They've been weird. They're always weird. But especially from like 2011 to 2014 or so. Like, I was jumping from one MCN or multi-channel network to another for years, they were all like increasingly crap in their own way or another. Some good, but mostly not. And eventually just went fully independent and left all that stuff behind and just went directly through YouTube once they allowed my kind of channel to join in the partner program. And been lucky to have this become my full-time job, more or less ever since December of 2012. And that's when I quit my day job anyway. And looking back, like, as crazy as it was, I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I don't think I would go and do it all over again. I would certainly do about 1 billion things differently, but I'm certainly okay with how things worked out, you know, like hitting all these subscriber milestones over the years. I never thought I'd get to 100,000, much less 1 million, and like certain videos going viral every so often is just bizarre. Hitting the trending pages or like mainstream media and just kind of stuff like that. It's a rush, but that's not why I keep doing this. In the end, it all passes, and those weird, surreal feelings of fakeness and, you know, just evaporating attention, it all passes, and I'm right back to just being a dude, a geek that, for whatever reason, people care to listen to regarding old computers and stuff for 15 years now. Good grief. And yeah, whatever reason you're watching, whatever reason, seriously, I thank you for it. I'm glad if it relaxes you, it puts you to sleep, if it's just part of your routine. I don't care, man. Like, you're watching and that's amazing. It's weird for anybody to be able to do anything, I think, for 15 years, but especially something in the creative online person space, whatever. Like I said, it all feels kind of fake, but it's real at the same time. And I'm reminded of that every so often, like right now. So again, thank you very much for watching. Here's to another amount of time.